Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a very interesting story that came out around Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin and Jimmy Sexton. That was very interesting. Definitely some interesting quotes in there, and breaks down just how questionable that relationship between Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin was for quite some time. But getting into a little bit of a recruiting update here, there were a number of big-time commitments over the last little bit, but also a ton of intel that I need to get you guys updated on. And we'll start with one of the biggest commitments that happened over the past week with Akeelan Deer. He committed to Alabama. This was pretty much set in stone the second that he decommitted from Ole Miss, if I had to imagine. It felt like Alabama was leading from that day and officially has gotten his commitment. A huge running back, 6 foot, 210, one of those guys that looks like an SEC running back right now, and will be added to a group over there at Alabama that is just outright ridiculous at the running back position. So a huge pickup for them, and definitely someone that is going to play pretty early on in his career at Alabama, if I had to imagine. A 4-star wide receiver, Andrew Marsh, has committed to Michigan. This is a huge pickup. I talked about this a number of times, but a number of teams were in on him. Washington, Texas, USC, Colorado, all teams that hypothetically are more explosive on the offensive side of the ball for those wide receivers than Michigan is. And I think pulling this guy in is massive. And it really, when you look at Michigan recruiting right now comparative to 2 years ago, 3 years ago with Jim Harbaugh, it's totally different. Sherrone Moore knows that he has to elevate that part of his program if they're going to continue this sustained success, and this is a really good player to bring in. This is a guy that can absolutely fly, and if you can have more and more players on that Michigan roster that is just about getting the ball in their hands and letting them go, I think this offense could get way more dynamic in a couple of years. So absolutely huge pickup there, and definitely a guy that I expect, frankly, to start his first year at Michigan. Moving on, the biggest commitment of this past little bit was Michael Fasusi, a remarkably talented 5-star offensive tackle from Louisville, Texas. He is committed to Oklahoma. Bill Bedenbaugh did incredible work in this recruitment. Frankly, this one might be one of the biggest commits of this entire cycle. When you look at what OU needs on that offensive line, and you look at how good Michael Fasusi is, he is likely going to be a starter on this offensive line next year. And it's going to be a little bit out of necessity, but frankly, I don't think they're going to worry about it too much. I think this guy is going to be just downright incredible and be one of those guys, kind of like a Kelvin Banks or a Will Campbell, that walks in, starts right away, maybe has a couple of bumps in the road his freshman year, but then develops into a straight-up first-round talent, no doubt about it. So very much like this kid, and beating out A&M and Texas had to feel a little bit good as well, a little cherry on top of this one. But moving on to some scheduled commitments that are coming up this weekend and, over the next couple of days, is Onis Kunabani, is committing today around 12:45, 12:30. Definitely one to watch. Very talented corner, 6'1", 180. Perfect cornerback size, frankly, as of right now. And it sounds like Tennessee might just get this one. It's down to them and Florida State, but as of right now, Tennessee is getting all of the crystal balls, and frankly, I would be surprised if he wasn't a Vol at the end of today, and Tennessee just keeps rolling on. It's absolutely ridiculous what they've been able to do over the last little bit, and it sounds like they're going to add to it today. Moving over to Nick Brooks, he is also committing today at 4 p.m. This is one to watch. This is a huge, huge commitment for one team in particular, and that's Texas. Texas obviously just lost out on Michael Fasusi. This is a way to kind of soften that sting, kind of make that look a little bit better, and it sounds like they're leading as of right now. They've gotten a couple of predictions for him to commit to Texas later today, but USC is still pushing through that through the wire, through that whistle, so we'll see what happens here, but as of right now, I would lean Texas, and pretty heavily lean Texas. Over to Nate Shepard, a very talented 3-star running back that is going to commit a little bit later tonight. He's down to a number of teams, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to Duke. Northwestern, Cincy, Cal, and Tulane are in it. He is a Louisiana kid, so Tulane getting a little bit of a look there. But as of right now, it looks like Duke is going to get this one, and that would be a great pickup for the start of the Manny Diaz era and kind of getting this thing off the ground on the recruiting world. Moving over to Jonah Williams, this is the guy that probably is the main event of the weekend. He is committing on Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and it's a three-team battle. LSU, A&M, and Texas are still in this thing. It sounds like LSU and Texas are starting to pull away from A&M just a little bit, but Steve Wiltfong has put in a prediction for Williams to commit to Texas, and that would be absolutely huge for Texas because that back-end recruiting has not necessarily been great as of lately. So definitely something that they could very much use, and he was at A&M. One of the biggest differences in this recruitment has been the baseball coach over at Texas, Jim Schlossnagle, and he was actually at A&M a year ago. So maybe that was the difference. Maybe if he was still at A&M, that's where Jonah Williams is. So it shows you that, even if you have a football commit, you can all work together and find a way to get that guy on campus. So a huge thing for Texas, and it sounds like they got a little bit of an assist from the baseball team. Javon McFadden is another guy to watch, 4-star interior offensive lineman. He is going to commit on tomorrow at some point. Doesn't sound like there's a specific time set, but he's between Colorado, Maryland, Ohio State, and South Carolina. It sounds like it's going to be Ohio State. It sounds like more and more is pushing towards that, but I do kind of want to touch on, the fact that the top four is Colorado, Maryland, Ohio State, and South Carolina. This gives you an idea of what recruiting is today. There's going to be more of these kids that have these kind of weird top four, and maybe the Ohio States and the Alabamas and the Texas and the Georgias win out at the end of the day. But it does show you that NIL and some of this other stuff is slowly, very slowly, kind of evening the scales, and it's definitely a really interesting thing to watch. I feel like I've seen much more weird top fours this year than I ever have before. Jonte Gilbert was another one that was, I believe, Georgia, NC State, USF, and Georgia Tech. So very, very interesting groups that is going to make recruiting just a little bit more fun as we move forward, not this cycle, but moving forward into 2026 and 2027. Aiden Anding is another guy to watch. He is committing tomorrow, and definitely going to be a very interesting commitment because right now it looks like it's LSU. It looks like it is all LSU, and they've been able to lock down the in-state kid from Ruston, Louisiana. But Texas is going to push as hard as they possibly can. Period. End of story. They are going to do everything they can to get this guy on the roster because it might be Terry Joseph's job if he doesn't. That is the cornerback coach over at Texas, and right now they have one cornerback commit, and he is the 103rd cornerback in the country. Now, I think Caleb Chester is a good player. I'm not necessarily talking down about Caleb Chester, but if you're Texas, you need more than that. Maybe it's through the portal at the end of the day, but I can almost promise you, if they don't, flip a guy like Dorian Brew or like Devin Sanchez or I'm blanking on his name right now, but there is a cornerback committed to TCU that is a very good player. But at the end of the day, if they don't flip one of those guys, Terry Joseph might be finding another job this time next year. So something to watch there, but I feel like it's going to be LSU. If it's not Texas, then you might just start wanting to watch Terry Joseph just a little bit closer over there in Austin. LSU also looks to add Walter Mathis, the 3-star defensive lineman. Very, very talented guy. And frankly, the biggest thing about this guy is his motor apparently is ridiculous. And that's what LSU needs. They don't necessarily need all of these 4-star defensive linemen because that's going to take time. You got to show that your defensive lineman coach, Bo Davis, is developing these guys, putting these guys in the best scenarios to get those top flight guys. In the meantime, getting guys that have really high motors and are going to work every single day will definitely do the job. I can promise you that. So a huge pickup there, and definitely someone that I really like in this recruiting class. Moving on to Nashawn Montgomery, 4-star wide receiver. This one looks like it's going to be the Florida Gators. LSU still in it. Florida State, Bama, Oregon, Penn State, they're all still in it. But I think it's going to be Florida. They're kind of running away with this one, and it's just astounding to me every single time that Florida gets a big-time commit because it shows me more and more that that program is working very differently on the inside than what we think it is on the outside. So definitely going to be something to watch, and it sounds like Florida just continues to build up a class that, frankly, with a coach that might be out the door at the end of the year, they should not be able to put together. But moving on to Andrew Babalola, it sounds like he is getting closer and closer to that decision, and it sounds like it's getting more and more of a Michigan versus Stanford battle. Stanford had a number of crystal balls early on in this process, and then Michigan kind of came out of nowhere and stole the show a little bit. Oklahoma still feels like they are kind of in this fight, but locking up Michael Fasusi obviously kind of takes away from this one a little bit. Missouri's another team to watch. watch, but as of right now, I'm going to lean into Michigan. I do think Michigan is likely going to win this one out. I think Stanford's going to be a very close second, but I do think Michigan wins this one and gets a big-time offensive lineman, the same way they've been getting big offensive linemen the last 10 years. So a huge pickup there. And then just some quick hitting updates here. Michael Terry, the second, is someone, number one athlete in the country, very talented kid. He's starting to make his visits around. He's going to be in Nebraska for that Colorado game in week 2. He's going to make a visit to Texas and Oregon before it's all said and done. So this is one that we felt like might come off the board this month. Very unlikely that happens. Probably is a little bit more dragged out than that, but still seems like a Texas lean as of right now. But as we know, these recruitments that take a little bit longer, a lot of stuff can happen. So we'll see what happens there. I think Oregon is still very much in this one, and Nebraska still hangs around quite a bit in this one. So definitely will be something to watch. As of right now, I'd lean Texas, but it could change in a day. The biggest story in recruiting right now is Deuce Knight. The Notre Dame commit 5-star quarterback is going to be in Auburn, Alabama for the Alabama A&M game in week 1. This feels like the moment. I think all of us have kind of been waiting for that moment where he finally flips, he finally makes that big-time decision, and I think it might just come on that weekend. I don't necessarily say surprised, but I tend to think he's going to have a commitment in, or at least public, by the end or during that visit. I would just have to be honest there. I do think that's likely what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, maybe Notre Dame can fend that off and keep that guy in the class, because they very much need him. Moving on, Phillip Bell, a very, very talented wide receiver out of Mission Viejo, California. Excuse me, kind of in between my words there. But he will announce his decision on the 31st of August. It all looks like Ohio State right now. I'd be very surprised if it went any other direction. A lot of time till that date, but it's going to be Ohio State if I had to imagine. Penn State is leading the way for Malachi Goodman. USC still trying to do work here the same way they're trying to do work for Nick Brooks, but at the end of the day, it looks like Penn State is going to be the team. Auburn's another team to watch here, but I'd lean towards Penn State in this one, and could not imagine that there would be a better place for an offensive tackle to go right about now. And then moving on, we have one more very, very interesting thing. Oregon sounds like they're trying to flip a big-time tight end. Vander Plug, a very talented 6'6", 210-pound guy that is a Washington commit right now. So it would be a little bit of a steal for Oregon to pull him away, but definitely is going to be one that is going to be really interesting to watch. And I think Oregon might just be successful in this one, because they've been successful in just about everything in the world of recruiting lately. But definitely a lot of stuff going on in recruiting. A couple of other commitments that are coming up soon, Jamie French and a number of other guys that we will absolutely update you on here and there throughout the season. But we're about to get into football, so it's going to be a little bit harder to get around to recruiting, but we absolutely will keep you updated as you need it. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to do some lingering questions around the top 25 teams. We have the last 3 top 25 teams, and then I just picked the next 3 teams that got the most amount of votes to give some questions about. So we got 6 teams for you right after this, so stick with us.